Tonight, President Uhuru Kenyatta wins again. The hidden taxes that he had proposed in his memorandum were endorsed in a chaotic session in Parliament.
The debate on the Finance Bill 2018 united the House once again for the first time in a long time. But is Parliament finally free of the executive's firm grip?
Our coverage starts right now. First, the top stories.
Tonight, it's official. You pay more in taxes. President Kenyatta's proposed taxes sailed through in a house of disarray with claims of rigging.
The leader of majority employs a number of tricks.
Also tonight, tens of legislators go against their party leaders.
Sisi tunapigania Mkenya yule wa chini.
We must know who was in the house.
They vow to seek redress in court after losing vote in the House.
Plus, former Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero woken up at dawn by detectives seeking documents at his home and office.
They never had evidence to arrest me in the first place.
Also, two suspects in the 9-year-old Maribel Capolon's murder to be held for 10 days as family and friends celebrate the young victim.
Maribel would always make you smile.
NTV Tonight with Mark Masai and Gladys Gachanja.
Thank you for joining us. Our sign language interpreter tonight is David Agonor.
And tonight we can reveal how the refusal of the National Assembly leadership to read the mood of the House before the first round of voting led to protests and shouting contests on the floor.
The National Assembly temporary speaker, Narok County woman Representative Soipan Tuye, ignored a loud vote against the president's memo and handed a victory to the legislators from the Jubilee side.
The plenary became ungovernable. If you were witnessing this, the speaker, Justin Muturi, had to be called in to take control of the now out-of-order House. And in a moment, we'll be talking to Soipan Tuye. She is live from her home.
Of course, Ken Mijungu is working on the details of that story. But of course, the implications of that finance bill go far and wide.
That is right. Just besides the fact that the 8% levy on fuel has been effected now that it has been passed, Parliament's actions today means Kenyans should brace for even tougher times ahead, as the President's memorandum to Parliament contained new and more punitive levies on a number of goods and services.
Well, when the President signs the Finance Bill 2018 into law, expectedly sometime tonight before he leaves the country, you will pay much more to send money via mobile phone, as a 12% excise duty will be charged on all mobile money transfers.
A 15% excise duty will also be charged on telephone and internet data services, while a 12% duty will be charged for more money transfer services by banks, money transfer agencies and other financial service providers.
Well, that's not all. A 20% excise duty will be imposed on motor vehicles, including public school buses, with the exception of locally assembled vehicles.
The price of kerosene will also go up by 18% per litre. Employees also face a 1.5% cut in their monthly basic salary to cater for the National Housing Development Fund, which is a part of the President's Big Four agenda.
So again, the ripple effects of that fuel tax at 8% go beyond just what has happened today, and we'll be keeping an eye on the same and speaking to various stakeholders to react on that.
Well, chaos would define what happened today in Parliament. We can reveal how the refusal of the National Assembly leadership to read the mood of the House before the first round of voting led to protests and shouting contests on the floor.
The National Assembly temporary speaker, that is Narok County woman Representative Soipan Tuye, ignored a loud loud vote against the president's memo and handed victory to a handful of legislators who are in favor of the motion.
The plenary became ungovernable. The Speaker, Justin Muturi, had to be called in to take control of the now out-of-order House.
Ken Mijungu with the details on how House of Honor was shouted and played into dishonor.
National Assembly Bill number 20 of 2018.
When Soipan Tuya walked into the chambers a few minutes past 2 p.m., the task at hand was no doubt enormous. The National Assembly was to vote on the memorandum from the President after he referred the Finance Bill 2018 back to the House. The most acrimonious clause was that on VAT on petroleum products, which proposed it to slash the 16% by half, but still a steeper demand on Kenyans who have not been paying the fuel tax. The first task was to consider the numbers. For the memo to fall, a mandatory threshold of 2/3 was needed. 233 members of parliament must have voted against it. In the chamber, the system indicated that there were 352 members in the House, 3 members more than the number of legislators in the National Assembly, but that did not stop the session's chairperson from proceeding. And so, Soipan Tuya put the question.
Honorable members, will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Controversially, she awarded the vote to the apparent minority, the ayes. And this was the beginning of a long afternoon for Tuya. The members of parliament protested, and as the standing orders demand, where there is a doubt, a second vote is taken through the division. But first,
I now direct the clerks, under Standing Order 62, to take a head count.
As the uproar and temperatures rose, some members of parliament walked out of the chambers strategically to bring down the numbers and weaken the fight against the president's plan. The doors to the chambers were then locked on orders from the chair. Some were even taken into a room next to the chambers where they were closed in, while others watched from the screens in parliament's lobby. These are some of the members of parliament who walked away at the crucial time, bringing down the numbers. They included Minority Leader John Mbadi, Minority Whip Junet Mohammed, and Kidero East Member of Parliament Peris Tubiko, amongst others.
The majority leader came and started pushing people to go out, and even he locked some people in the toilet.
And the majority leader was bold and unapologetic on this.
The leader of majority, like the leader of majority in the House of Representatives, in the Congress, employs a number of tricks to make sure that the government agenda is complied with.
I now direct the clerks, under Standing Order 62, to take a head count.
Back in the chambers, a physical count revealed that there were only 215 members left in the House, a number below the threshold needed to successfully vote out the amendment. This meant that the memo, with all its implications in tow, stood approved, paving way for its adoption and debate on individual clauses in the memo. This led to widespread protests. The Speaker would then step in to calm the House down. His efforts, however, were met with resistance. Muturi will then allow the members to vent. All the 10 representatives chosen from the plenary confirmed to him that indeed the nays had their say and must also have their way.
The chair had satisfied herself that we were more than 232 in the House.
Swali likaulizwa, na swali lilipoulizwa, wabunge wote kwa kauli moja wakakubaliana na kupinga na kusema ya kwamba hawatakubali kama wanavyotaka, ila kama wanavyotaka Wanjiko.
What is expected is people to stand wherever they are if they want to go for a division. I can confirm, Mr. Speaker, nobody stood. Instead, people started walking out.
And we took the vote. Mr. Speaker, sir, thereafter we were being forced to to go into a further voting after we had already done.
Following the revelations, the House resolved to take another vote under the guidance of the Speaker. He, however, said that the previous vote passed, citing evidence on the procedure registered in the Hansard. And after all, what could be described as games on numbers and votes, the President had his way in Parliament. Ken Mijungu, NTV.
So on Opinion Count tonight, we are asking, do you support the passing of the Finance Bill 2018?
Do you support the passing of the Finance Bill 2018? Vote on our Twitter handle at NTV Kenya, as well as at Gladys_Gachanja, at Mark Masai, as well on our SMS platform, which is 2086, and we will share the results during this broadcast.
Just to read a question to you again, do you support the passing of the Finance Bill 2018?
And staying on the same matter, while some MPs were joined in choruses demanding the fall of the president's proposals, the chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Kimani Ichung'wah, stood by his guns and defended the dip of reach into your pockets.
And Eden Duale affirmed that the plans will be cast on stone within the next 24 hours.
None of the members of Parliament in the House of National Assembly was sent to Parliament to perform legislation, oversight and representation through clapping and singing. When a member of Parliament says, "Bado mapambano," where else will you take the mapambano? And when they realized they don't have the number, and the number was said, they became with all manner of behavior. It's very, very unfortunate, and I want to apologize as the leader of majority on behalf of the members who in one way or the other behaved disorderly, contrary to the standing orders.
We must be honest with Kenyans. One, if this memorandum passes or the House agrees with the President, that is when VAT will come down to 8%. The next conversation that we need to get ourselves into as Kenyans, is it government that is punishing Kenyans, or is it Kenyans, especially business people, punishing us? Let us start begin asking ourselves, even if we were to move VAT to 0% today, is that matatu guy who has increased your fare from 30 to 50 shillings, is he going to drop the fare back to 30 shillings? That is the next conversation we need to get Kenyans involved in, because we must be honest enough. We are saying government needs to raise taxes for us to be able to offer the services and goods that we have promised the people of Kenya. And there is no Kenyan who is saying they don't want to pay taxes, but they want to pay taxes and see value out of those taxes. And that is the next conversation we need to be able to be asking Kenyans. Are we going now to get, and the members of Parliament who are now shouting here, I wish they were speaking about holding government to account on how they utilize those taxes.
Was the open rebellion on the floor of the House a sign that members of Parliament are finally on their way to finding their legislative independence away from the executive's firm grip?
While Kennedy Muriithi reflects on the day's activities and reports that members of Parliament who spoke after the chaotic session say they are ready to carve out their own path.
Okay, now sit down and vote.
The stage had been set for a verbal brawl on the floor of the House over the President's tax recommendations.
Take your seats. Take your seats, members.
And from the onset, members of Parliament had made it clear they will step outside of their political party lines. Inside Parliament, in a session that was marked by heckling and over-the-top applauses, MPs openly defied the House leadership and their political party's bosses who had voiced support for the memorandum.
Mr. Speaker, Jesus Christ and even all the religious leaders, Muslims and spiritually, were with us in this house. That is why the numbers were higher.
The MPs say they felt betrayed by the House leadership, as well as their political parties, who they say had become indifferent to the pain that was eating at Kenyans.
This is the time the House has started claiming now it is growing back. And we would want to show them that a time has come for them to shape up, or otherwise they'll shape up.
This country is going down the drain. There's no leadership, there's tyranny of the executive, and other political leaders in the country. There is no opposition.
Bandi came in and he changed his mind, and yet when it was before Raila, he said Raila 50-50, and now he has changed. So hata kama ni mambo ya party, Raila ameuza Kenya.
Order, members!
In the chamber and during the first count, a total of 215 members were present, but with a majority who intended to voice their opposition to the punitive taxation measures. Though short of the required majority of 233 MPs, they were out to make a statement.
We have the bell rung for 5 minutes.
But their voice was apparently not loud enough.
The leader of majority, like the leader of majority in the House of Representatives, in the Congress, employs a number of tricks to make sure that the government agenda is complied with. And let me finish. When half of my team, I told them to withdraw, my business was to make sure that the 233 threshold is not achieved.
At one time, the Jubilee Party Vice Chairperson David Morathe and the Secretary General Raphael Tuju were seen within the precincts of Parliament. The session had been marked by shouting as they openly called out those who they accused of not being true to the cause.
Wale watu ambao wamewaweka kaburini kwa kuhakikisha kwamba bei ya mafuta taa, bei ya petroli, fare ya gari, school fees ya watoto yao, wale ambao wamewawekea hiyo mzigo, wa kwanza ni Muturi, wa pili ni Duale, wa tatu ni Mbadi, wa nne ni Junet, halafu na machamani wote wa committee.
We will proceed to the court and to whatever measure we need to take as legislators to defend action of wananchi.
The MPs say this is the beginning of their rebellion as they insist on reclaiming the independence of the House and free it from the grip of the executive or the political party bosses.
Kennedy Muredhi, NTV at Parliament Buildings.
It has been a long, chaotic day in Parliament, and we're now talking to Soipan Tuya, the woman representative from Narok County, who was a temporary speaker as the session was going on, and especially when things got rough in Parliament earlier today. It's been a long day for you. Thank you for having us. She's joining us from her residence here in Nairobi, and many would describe, especially the session that you presided over, as a fraudulent, rigged process. Mheshimiwa Soipan, I believe you can hear me now, because earlier we did test the sound. First of all, the process that you were overseeing at around 2:30 p.m. this afternoon, it got quite chaotic, especially when you got to the acclamation part of things. This has been described as many as fraudulent.
Hello, Mark.
Yes, if you can hear me, please respond to the allegations that the process that you oversaw today was not clear in terms of how you went about it. It was a fraudulent and a rigged process.
Yes, Mark, I can hardly hear you, but you want me to confirm the kind of happenings that happened in Parliament today.
Certainly.
When I was presiding over the House.
Right, right.
And I want to say that I've had a lot of noise and a lot of finger pointing at Soipan to the effect that I did not follow the procedures of Parliament.
Right.
And I want to just say that the people making noise, especially members of Parliament, they are only doing so you know, they have either of two things. One being that they are feigning ignorance of the rules and procedures of the House, as well as constitutional provisions that guide the kind of process we had today in Parliament, or a lot of hypocrisy and dishonesty.
Right.
And this is why I say this. We were dealing with a presidential memo, and the guiding provisions of the Constitution are Articles 115 and Article 122 of the Constitution, which set a threshold in terms of how Parliament should handle a memorandum sent back to Parliament with reservations.
This is clear, 233.
And the threshold is for those people opposing or who want to oppose the President's reservations have to raise a two-third majority, which in our case is 233 members.
Right.
And those in support of the presidential memo only require a simple majority. Now, when it comes to a voice vote, how do you determine that you know, the threshold has been reached of 233 or the simple majority? The only logical and procedural way to do that is for members to go to the vote. And actually, those voting against the presidential memo are obligated to confirm that they actually reached the constitutional threshold.
But if you may...
The only procedural way to do that, which is more of a formality, is to have the ayes have the vote or carry the day to lead to a voting process so that we can confirm the numbers.
All right. And at that point, and it is on record, it would seem, at least from the audio and at least from the sound, that the nays had it at that point, but you went ahead and gave it to the ayes.
Yes, I did that.
But with what was there in terms of the audio and the acclamation, the nays had it, certainly.
You remember that the session was very chaotic. Members went on to sing and shout, and I made an attempt to give an explanation to the members or to guide them through the procedures that after they do their voice, I take their voices, they were obligated to vote. But they could not give me a chance to, you know, guide them through that process.
Would you agree?
And, the hypocrisy I'm talking about, Mark, is that on you know, taking members were avoiding to take the vote, you know, because voting gives a physical list, which then shows where each and every person voted.
Then did you give the ayes out of frustration?
Failure to take the vote?
Yes.
And failure to take the vote would mean that the process is not complete.
Certainly, that's very clear.
My having the ayes was a formality to lead us to the voting. And you remember that immediately after the voice, taking the voice, I made attempts. The first attempt was to have them vote electronically. They refused. They shouted and they started singing. I tried to do the roll call. They also started shouting and, you know, not, you know, letting me guide them through the process of voting.
Then you did a head count.
Without which, yes, we did a head count, which gave us a total of 215 members.
All right.
Now, does that meet the constitutional threshold? It doesn't. And that means the ayes carried the day because we did not have the 233 members to make the threshold.
In hindsight, Mheshimiwa, having heard the session that was on record, and I'm sure you've seen it, you still maintain that the ayes have it in that particular incident?
Yes. 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 By virtue of a confirmation of the numbers that were in the House, which is 215, and we needed 233 to overturn the presidential memo.
At what point did you realize that the system read you had 352 members of parliament present, whereas we know the total is 349, and what did you do about it? Some would think that you just went on and ignored that.
Did you say that 352?
Yes. At what point did you realize that the system was reading 352 members of parliament instead of at least the total 349?
The 353 reading of the screen is actually a technical hitch. The real numbers of the members of parliament, we all know, is 349. But we have four administrators who administer the electronic system. These are the technical, the IT people. And you remember I made attempts to tell members to take out their cards from the voting machine, which is usually a normal procedure. Taking out of the cards makes sure that the system is cleaned and the numbers do not reflect the administrators of the electronic system.
Right.
So by refusing to take out the cards, the number on the screen went on to read the full number of members, 349, plus the 4 administrators of the electronic system.
Are you telling the Kenyans that the members of parliament, whatever they were trying to show on the floor of the House, was all pretense in the name of trying to fight this memorandum?
I think there was a lot of politics that they were playing, because Masai, you cannot have your cake and eat it at the same time. Because if they wanted to have their voices heard and their decisions recorded legally, as is provided by our standing orders and the Constitution, then they should have abided by the process to the end of it. But they made sure to frustrate the process of voting. And that's why we had to do a head count.
And in terms of the process, you maintain, as we conclude, that if you were to do it again, you would do it in the same exact way.
Yes, and also to say that members of parliament should also know that the House cannot be run on chaos. Because, you know, by me saying that the ayes have it, as a means to lead to the voting, was, you know, on reading the mood, that all they wanted to do was to create a chaotic scenario or scene, so that we don't lead to a process where we have clear voting and know where each and every person was voting.
You brought up something that I have to ask then. If indeed you're giving the ayes the vote in this instance was to avoid what the politics that we're bringing up, then in this case you're saying the nays actually had it in terms of the audible voice and acclamation.
Mark, my declaring the ayes as having it was just a process of leading us to completing the process, which is to go towards voting. Because had I given the nays, we would not have stopped there. We would still have to have got the full throttle of voting.
All right. Thank you very much, Soipan Tuya, for your time and for speaking to us this evening. Has been a very long day for you. Hope you have a good rest tonight. And Gladys, at least the conversation will definitely continue in the name of cost of living for Kenyans.
Yes, it does, and it will. Remember, our opinion count tonight. Do you support the passing of that Finance Bill 2018? We are following that conversation on Twitter, and we shall be getting to your contributions in a moment. For now, many low-income earning Kenyans are still asking the government to reconsider its proposal to raise taxes. Our reporter Bridget Singana spoke to one such family in Nakuru's Kaptembwe estate who told her the high cost of living might just push them back up country.
Veronica Makungu is a seamstress in this establishment here in Kaptembwe, one of Nakuru's informal settlements. Her toiling here earns her a weekly pay of 2,000 shillings, and it depends on the workload. In a good month, she takes home 8,000 shillings on average, and since she is the sole breadwinner, she has to juggle feeding her 8 children, herself, and her husband, whose income is also unreliable. Since the increase in tax on oil products took effect, Veronica's household has been feeling the pinch.
Natumia taa kuona usiku. Unakuta hata unaweza tumia mafuta mingi kwa sababu hata sasa tulikuwa tunanunua hata shilingi 10 na sasa hii hakuna. Iwezi fika mpaka hiyo masaa nyingine, maana hao watoto wakikuja lazima wafanye homework. Unakuta hata wamalizi kufanya homework taa imezima.
And it is even worse since they now cannot afford a commodity they need and use most, kerosene.
Nilikuwa naweza kununua lita moja ya mafuta taa, lakini sasa venye iliongeza siwezi fikia, pengine nanunua ya pound. Na at least hiyo lita moja ilikuwa inanipeleka karibu wiki moja, at least siku 3 siku 4 hapo. Na hii saizi hata ya pound ni kidogo sana, haitoshi. Serikali itusaidie, itupunguzie vitu chini.
Veronica's husband shares similar sentiments that the heavy tax burden will only widen the divide between the rich and the poor.
Ni sisi tunatoa tax na inafaa watuzingatie ili yenye wanakata tubaki na kiasi. Jubila chochote hatutamudu hao watoto. Tuna watoto mashuleni, tuna watoto ma colleges. Hawatafaulu.
And what if the cost of living keeps going up?
Kwa sababu ya kuongeza itanibidi tu niende mashambani kwa sababu siwezi afford na hao watoto wote.
Katembo is one among the many other informal settlements here in Nakuru County, and from our engagement with those living here, it is a definite fact that they are harshly affected by the changes in prices and the rising taxes. Bridget Ngana, NTV, Nakuru County.
And staying with those reactions, Kenyans have expressed displeasure in how the members of the parliament conducted themselves before passing the proposed taxes by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Here are some of their views.
These guys should sit down as watu wanaelewa, wa decide vizuri for the Kenyans. We elected them, so they're supposed to represent us, not to add more problems.
We actually annoyed with what has happened today in the parliament.
Why?
We expected the members of parliament to act out of whatever is sent them to do there, but then it looks like they're doing other things for their own.
Rais Uhuru Kenyatta at least angefikiria mara mbili kuhusu hivi eti angefikiria kabisa hawa bunge hakuna Kenya wanatusaidia nayo kabisa, hawa bunge wangetolewa kabisa. Tubaki na maseneta na magavana basi.
Wabunge wetu wametuangusha sana. Sisi kama wananchi hatuna imani na wao. Na pendekezo ya wananchi wote ambao nimesikia nikienda around ni kwamba heri wabunge ama bunge lote libanduliwe ama litupiliwe mbali na seneti ijadili maono hiyo.
Sio ilikuwa tu kwenda side shows kwa bunge ndio watoke nje warudi ndio watuoneshe sisi raia ati kuna kitu inaendelea na kumbe walikuwa shamalizana. Sasa sisi ni watu wa chini bado tunaumia. Mgeni wa chini ana lolote la kusema.
Tunataka kusema sasa wananchi wagoje matunda ambayo serikali itawaletea.
Pesa hakuna, mtu anajaribu kungangana kutoka asubuhi mpaka jioni, unapata hakuna zile pesa umepata, hakuna kusefu, ni kukula tu.
Tunaomba serikali kwa moyo mkunjufu ipunguze tu bei ya mafuta, angalau ndio mwananchi wa kawaida apate kupata chakula cha kutosha.
Well, earlier today, in another heated session, Parliament approved the Budget and Appropriations Committee's report that reduced the 3 trillion shillings national budget by about 38 billion shillings.
This will see budget cuts in a number of areas, including government departments that now have to reduce their recurrent expenditure by between 15% and 20%.
And as Vincent Odor reports, the judiciary is one of the few winners as its budget has been given an extra 1.5 billion shillings.
2 months into the 2018-2019 financial year, Chairman of the National Assembly's Budget and Appropriation Committee, Kimani Ichung'wa, tabled the committee's report on the supplementary budget estimates.
Let us for once show the country that we listen to each other.
Treasury had proposed a reduction of the 3 trillion shillings budget by 55.1 billion shillings, but the Budget and Appropriation Committee only managed to cut it by 37 billion shillings. The Constituency Development Fund CDF, which Treasury had proposed to reduce by 6 billion shillings, has been cut by 2.4 billion shillings. All government departments will now have to take budget cuts of between 15% to 20% on their recurrent expenditures. This is expected to reduce the total recurrent expenditure by 9 billion shillings. The report has also retained the proposal to reduce funds to the county governments by 9.04 billion shillings. But this process will require further legislation.
Out training, those also have been touched, and it is across the board to ensure that there is fairness across the board, be it in the executive, in all ministries.
Among the winners, though, is the National Government Affirmative Action Fund that Treasury had proposed that it be cut to 600 million shillings, has been given an addition of 1.5 billion shillings, raising it to 2.1 billion shillings. The judiciary, which has been in a financial crisis, has been given an additional 1.5 billion shillings.
We cannot have an independent judiciary without financial autonomy and financial independence. We have added back to our judiciary a sum of Kenya shillings, 1.5 billion shillings, to ensure, especially the completion of courts, to ensure there is enough court space to prosecute the corruption cases that are ongoing and other cases that have been lying in our courts.
The current fiscal deficit stands at 562.75 billion shillings,
which will be financed both by domestic and foreign borrowing. And for us to be able to access that foreign borrowing, for investors to have confidence in this economy, we must, as a country, show that we have the fiscal discipline.
The budgets of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, National Intelligence Service, Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, and Judicial Service Commission have, however, remained intact. Vincent Odur, NTV.
Before we take a short break on NTV Tonight, we asked you that question: do you support the passing of the Finance Bill 2018? A lot of reactions coming through, including one here from Meshach Hamala, who says, no, I don't support the newly proposed finance bill, passed bill actually, since the cost of living will be more tricky for the struggling Kenyan. We voted MPs to represent us, but it seems they are making decisions for their own benefit and not for their constituents.
Kinoti Titus, you say not at all. The nays carry the day, but the vote turned otherwise. Mike Mushai says absolutely no. This will make Kenyans more poorer than they are right now.
Maybe one last one. Martin says, to support or not to support, what difference does it make? By now things couldn't be any clearer that democracy to Kenyans is only a facade. We have those who are controlling things behind the curtains, and majority of what we see is just a show. Every move is predetermined.
NTV Tonight takes another break at this point, after which we'll have the business of the day. Hopefully that will even touch on elements of the finance bill that has been passed. Welcome back. Before we get into the business with Dan Mwangi, as I earlier mentioned, let's look at other stories that were developing in the day. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission once again came calling for former Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero conducting a 10-hour raid on his home and office.
The detectives were after title deeds, contracts, cash, checkbooks, correspondence and electronics in a bid to ascertain the source of what they describe as his unexplainable wealth.
Olive Burrows has more.
This is pure harassment, is a violation of my rights. And we will not take this lying down.
And true to his word, he did not.
Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Am I under arrest? I know you're not under arrest. Yeah, then I'm going in my car.
This was former Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero's strong reaction to having his home raided at the crack of dawn. EACC was hounding him for the second time now.
The last time, on the 9th, on the 8th, when they came for me, I accompanied them. And I took myself to EACC. When we got to the door, they started pushing me, just to create drama, to give the impression that that things are very serious.
Not a word, however, was uttered by the detectives who carried out the 10-hour search of his home and office, carting away documents and computers. Among the items seized as the former governor bore witness were his wife and son's passports.
I lost a son in 1999. He was 15 and a half. They took his passport. They took his documents. Of what relevance is that?
The former governor has now vowed to challenge the legality of the search warrant issued by the chief magistrate on Wednesday. In the application, the EACC makes the case that Kidero has amassed unexplainable wealth which is not commensurate to his known source of income. It goes on to shine a spotlight on his dealings at the Mumias Sugar Company, where he worked as managing director and more recently as the Nairobi governor. The EACC stating in its application that it received a report that Kidero colluded with public officials from the Nairobi City County Government and the Mumias Sugar Company Limited to defraud the government of colossal sums of money. Also under scrutiny is a family bank account in his name and the family bank accounts of Gem Apartments Limited, Hyde African Dishes and Restaurant and the Caps Limited. The four are under investigation for colluding to transfer public funds into their private accounts.
It's been 10 hours since the DCI and EACC detectives began rummaging through Evans Kidero's personal belongings, starting first at his home in Muthaiga and followed by his office behind us. At the end of the ordeal, Kidero says there is nothing to find and accuses them of seeking to deflect attention from the crisis at the national and county level.
They were too looking for a headline tomorrow when newspapers and press and even this evening we'll be reporting the debate in Parliament on the 8% on VAT. Kenyans are not going to be duped. They are not going to accept inflated standard of living because we have a government that has failed to manage our fiscal policies and fiscal processes.
Kidero is already facing charges before the anti-corruption court over the loss of 213 million shillings in his time as Nairobi governor and for receiving an improper benefit for 24 million shillings for services not rendered. Olive Burrows, NTV.
Away from that, two suspects in the murder of 9-year-old Maribel Kapolon will be held for further 10 days as investigations into her murder continue.
The two were in court today but did not take plea as family and friends of the deceased gathered for her funeral service in Meru.
Brenda Wanga tells of the dark cloud that hang over the emotion-laden service, who calls for quick dispensation of justice being echoed.
A mother clings to the only physical memory she has of her daughter. Emotions overcome her. Surrounded by friends and family, yet it is a private moment for her. She mourns her child who was taken away in a cold, brutal manner, 9-year-old Maribel Kapolon. The empty space where her casket could have been makes her absence all the more conspicuous. A dry eye is hard to spot in the congregation as a funeral service gets underway. Maribel's classmates and other schoolmates remember the girl who was not only an avid scholar but a great athlete as well.
Maribel could always make you smile. We hope she knows how much we all miss her in the field of football as our beloved and able goalkeeper.
Her family is still gutted and still seeking answers, a feeling that is shared by friends.
Surely it has been a challenge unto us to explain what really happened. But we raise this all to God because we know nothing passes God. And one day, one time, we shall know actually what happened to our daughter.
Cruel can a human being become such that to set out such an outrageous design to murder an innocent, defenseless young child of only 9 years?
Is it possible that in our community we have developed this I don't care attitude? She is not my child attitude. It's not my work attitude. It is.
In the midst of the grief and affirmation that the murder of the minor will not stop the members of the judiciary from pursuing the path of justice.
No amount of intimidation, no amount of threats, no amount of terrorism, as Father said, will separate us from our oath of office.
I pray that the law of jungle will not prevail in this case.
That quest for justice for little Maribel has already begun. Two suspects, Benson Kimathi, a prison warder, and Francis Otudo, were arraigned in a Meru court but did not take plea. The duo stood in the dock with not much of a remorseful look. The court allowed the prosecution to hold them for 10 more days as investigations into the murder continue. Maribel will be buried this Saturday. Brenda Wanga, NTV.
At 9:45 p.m., we take another short break on NTV Tonight. Dan Mwangi is next with the business news.
Business News in association with Safaricom Business.
Good evening and welcome to NTV Business. I'm Dan Mwangi. Massive congestion leading to delays in loading of oil tankers with fuel at the Kenya Pipeline Company's depot in Eldoret will soon be a thing of the past with the operationalization of a state-of-the-art loading facility, according to the firm. But as Gabriel Kudaka explained, some independent petroleum dealers now see that the facility might not realize its full potential if the government sticks to its plan to have the increment in the VAT on petroleum products maintained.
Long queues of petroleum tankers waiting to be loaded at Eldoret's depot of the Kenya Pipeline Company have been a common sight, translating into additional costs for businessmen as a result of expenses incurred due to the delay. The previous facility here could only load 4.5 million liters per day.
With this facility, we've increased our output from 4.5 million liters to 6.5 million liters.
But even with the promise of some reprieve to petroleum dealers as a result of the investment in the new facility, some players are warning that implementation of a hike in the value-added tax on fuel will drive most traders to find alternative sources of the product, such as Uganda.
Go to Uganda, we are 25 shillings more expensive per liter per each product. Then if you are living along the border, you would rather go fuel across.
The Petroleum Cabinet Secretary says he will have a meeting with the region's stakeholders in the oil industry to determine the appropriate tariffs for the sector. The oil industry is central to the country's economy, given that changes in fuel prices cascade to all other sectors of the economy because of the transport component. And in order to spur a shift towards less wood fuel and more clean energy, Munyes says that 2 billion shillings has been set aside for a liquefied petroleum gas project.
We think we could improve the lives of Kenyans with a cheaper LPG project.
Gabriel Kudaka, NTV Business.
Some corporate news now, and Polycarp Igathe has been confirmed as the managing director of Equity Bank Kenya 5 months after joining the company. Igathe will oversee the bank's operations while James Mwangi continues to serve as the group chief executive and managing director of Equity Group Holdings. The banking giant has been in a transition process to separate the operations of the Kenyan banking subsidiary from that of the group. Igathe has previously worked at the county government of Nairobi as the deputy governor, and before that he served as the managing director at Vivo Energy Kenya. Now, through sheer hard work, they have scaled the heights and made it to the top in various sectors of the economy. This year's Women's Top 40 Under 40 by the Business Daily is finally here. To find out who they are and get to know their journeys to the top, make sure you grab yourself a copy of tomorrow's Business Daily. The annual Top 40 Under 40 initiative by Business Daily seeks to recognize ladies and gentlemen of outstanding credentials who have risen to the top in both corporate and entrepreneurial circles. Once again, celebrating women who are doing amazing things within their circles, be they big or small, but influence nonetheless. Now, Kenya is wooing Chinese investors to set up manufacturing plants in the country in order to create more jobs, reduce imports, and eventually narrow the wide trade deficit between the two countries. It is a strategy that is difficult to successfully implement, but one which the government is keen at giving a shot.
I spent 1.5 weeks in China talking to investors, because we want those big manufacturers also to come to Kenya to set shop in Kenya. Even as we support the smaller ones that are available, there is also space for the bigger ones. They all overall contribute to the growth of the economy. There are other sectors where we don't have manufacturers. That's why sometimes we keep importing. We don't want to continue importing from China. We want those companies from China to relocate to Kenya and they start producing from here.
On that note, it's time for me to get exported out of the studio. My name is Dan. Business is also done. Good night.
NTV Business News.
Thank you for staying with us. Ugandan pop star turned opposition MP Robert Kyagulanyi was taken away by security officers upon arrival at the country's international airport today.
Kyagulanyi, better known as Bobby Wine, had been seeking medical treatment in the United States. He says he was tortured in custody after being arrested last month.
The pop star turned opposition firebrand was charged with treason alongside more than 30 others after President Yoweri Museveni's motorcade was stormed by opposition supporters.
Security was tight with riot police and soldiers deployed at the airport and in the capital Kampala, 40 kilometers away after police outlawed any welcome processions or gatherings. It's time for sports with Brian Otwal after the break. 12 for the sports, and we'll have definitely much more tomorrow. Just a quick look at what you've written into our question, whether you support the passing of the Finance Bill 2018. And Mama Shelby from Kayole, you say, whatever President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta says, I support it 100%. And you leave us with scripture. Read Daniel 4:7.
Interesting.
17.
Dennis from Mombasa says, I do not support the bill. Please, this is not fair. Kijameni, this government, which kind of government did I vote for? God help us.
Today marks the death of Jubilee. Honorable Ruto, look for another bus. Sad Kenyan. We do not support, we are fed up with the sideshows pulling wool over our eyes.
Another one here that says, the one who oppressed, we are feeling oppressed by our leaders. Uhuru unatesa maskini waliokuchagua. 2022 pia inakam tena, Wakenya msidanganywe.
Hatuna imani na wabunge juu hawatutetei, wametuangusha.
Well, that conversation continues. Remember that SMS 20686, and of course on Twitter, a lot more going on, and we shall keep engaging you. Thank you for your company on NTV Tonight. My name is Gladys Gachanja, and a special thank you to David Agondoa, who was our sign language interpreter tonight.
I'm Masai. Good night. Thanks to the team that made this possible. Good night.